Everyone knows the Headmaster of Hogwarts, the long robes. The office at the top of the tower. The name that appears in history books and on brass plaques and in the memories of every student who ever passed through those gates. It is one of the most recognizable positions in the wizarding world, visible, respected, permanent in the way that institutions feel permanent. You see the portrait on the wall and you think that person mattered. That person was important. You don't think about what it cost them. Nobody does. That's the first thing you need to understand before this story begins. The position of Headmaster of Hogwarts is not what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, it is dignity and authority and the particular gravity of someone who runs the most famous school in Britain. From the inside, and this story is entirely about the inside, it is something more complicated, more isolating, and more irreversible than anyone who hasn't held it could possibly imagine. This is not a story about magic. Not really. It's a story about what happens when a person is handed a system that is older than they are, larger than they are, and fundamentally unwilling to be fully understood by any single human being, and what that system does to the person over time. While the person believes, for a very long while, that they are the one in control. You will begin as a teacher. Enthusiastic, capable, certain that you understand how the school works because you can see it, the corridors, the classrooms, the students, the rhythms of the academic year. You will be wrong about this, but you won't know it yet, and not knowing it will feel, for a while, like confidence. Then you will be promoted. Then promoted again. And with each step upward, the school will reveal itself to you in layers, like a building you've lived in for years suddenly showing you rooms you didn't know existed. Some of these rooms are extraordinary. Some of them you will wish you had never found. By the time you reach the office at the top of the tower, you will know things that no previous conversation prepared you for, things about the castle, things about its history, things about decisions made by the people whose portraits hang on your walls, who watch you from their frames with the particular patience of those who already know how this ends. The question is not whether the position will change you. The question is how much of the original you will be recognizable when it does stay vicis. Because what comes next is not the version of this story that gets told at the leaving feasts and the commemorative plaques and the ministry citations. What comes next is the real one. Level 1. The professor. You arrive at Hogwarts in September with 2 trunks and a folder of lesson plans you spent the entire summer revising. The castle receives you the way it receives everyone at first, with scale. The staircases that move without warning. The ceilings that reflect weather that isn't always the weather outside. The portraits that watch you with expressions you can't quite read. You learn to navigate it within a week. The way you learn any large building, by repetition, by mistake, by the gradual accumulation of a mental map that eventually becomes automatic. You are good at this. Teaching. You know it without arrogance, the way you know things that are simply true. The students respond to you. The lessons work. By November you have a reputation in the corridors, the good kind, the kind that arrives before you do. What you don't have yet is any real understanding of how the school functions above the level you can see. You see the headmaster occasionally. In the Great Hall, at the staff table, at the beginning and end of term feasts. You see a person who moves through the castle with a quality of attention that seems different from everyone else's, not distracted, not performative, but oriented towards something you can't locate. Like someone listening to a frequency just below audible range. You find this admirable. You think that is what authority looks like, settled, certain you will understand later that it wasn't certainty. It was the particular stillness of someone carrying too much to allow themselves to move quickly. But for now you teach your classes and grade your papers and learn which staircases to avoid on Thursdays and which portraits will talk to you if you stop and the castle feels, by the end of the first year, like somewhere you belong. Like somewhere you could stay. This is the last uncomplicated thought you will have about this place. Level 2. The head of house, the deputy headmistress, tells you over tea in her office in a tone that makes it clear this is not a question. You are head of house now. The students in your care number somewhere between 70 and 80 depending on the year. You know most of their names already. What you don't know, what you discover in the first month, is the volume of what the role actually contains beneath its visible surface. The pastoral weight alone is different from anything teaching prepared you for. A student whose parents are separating. Another whose home situation cannot be described in a letter without consequences. A third who is performing perfectly in every class and has not spoken to another student in 6 weeks. You begin to understand that for some of these children, Hogwarts is not school. It is the safest place they have. The only consistent one. This changes how you walk the corridors at night. You are invited now to certain staff meetings that you didn't know existed. Smaller than the full faculty meetings. Quieter. The headmaster speaks differently in these rooms, more directly, with less of the public register that characterizes the feast speeches. You learn things about the school's internal decisions that you realize. Afterwards, you were never meant to learn as a simple classroom teacher. One evening after one of these meetings, you ask a question, a reasonable question. You think about a policy that seems to have no clear origin. The headmaster looks at you for a moment before answering, not with irritation. With something closer to assessment, the answer is partial. You can tell it's partial. You accept it anyway. On the walk back to your office, you realize the school has a surface that is shown and a structure underneath that is managed. And you have just taken your first step from one into the other. Level 3, the headmaster asks you to stay after the meeting ends. Everyone else files out. The door closes. And in the particular silence of that office, the soft movement of the portraits, the instruments on the shelves ticking and turning, you are told things, not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that the version of Hogwarts you have known for the past decade is a simplified version. A version rendered safe for people who don't need to know more. You need to know more now. There are situations that recur across generations, patterns in certain families, histories that the school tracks quietly without advertising that it tracks them. There are agreements with the ministry that are older than anyone currently serving in either institution. There are parts of the castle that are managed, not merely maintained, spaces with histories that require active decisions about access, about disclosure, about how much any given student or parent or journalist is told when they ask the wrong question. You begin to sit with the headmaster during difficult meetings, families in crisis. Ministry officials conducting reviews. Governors with agendas you learn to read within the first 2 minutes. You watch how the headmaster navigates these what is said, what is withheld, how the language shifts depending on the audience. You are watching a performance of transparency that is not dishonest exactly, but is also not complete. You understand this. You tell yourself you understand this. Institutions require discretion. Not everything can be public. The school's first obligation is to its students. You believe this. You will keep believing it. The belief will simply cost more as time passes. At night, sometimes you walk the castle alone, the old habit. From your head of house years, and the castle feels different now, larger, not in dimension but in implication. Like a sentence you've been reading for years that turns out to have a subordinate clause you missed every time. Level 4. The nomination, the letter from the Board of Governors arrives on a Wednesday. You read it twice. Then you put it down and look out the window for a long time. The grounds are quiet, a group of third years crossing toward the greenhouses. A normal morning. Everything entirely normal and already slightly past. The installation is brief and institutional. Signatures, a ceremony with more witnesses than warmth. The outgoing headmaster retiring, finally, after years that aged them in ways that had stopped being subtle, shakes your hand and holds it a moment longer than necessary and says something you will think about for years, not advice. More like an acknowledgement. Like someone handing you a weight they are relieved to set down and sorry to pass on simultaneously. You walk into the office for the first time as its occupant. The portraits are all awake. Every previous headmaster and headmistress watching you from their frames with expressions that are impossible to read collectively, some warm, some cautious, some with the particular look of people who have seen this moment many times before and know things about it that you don't yet. The castle shifts. Something in the stone, in the air, in the way the light comes through the high windows, something changes or you change. You will spend years trying to determine which. You will not arrive at a clean answer. What you know standing in the center of that office on that Wednesday morning is this. The version of yourself that walked through the front gates with 2 trunks and a folder of lesson plans is a very long way from here. And the distance right now feels like accomplishment. Later, much later, it will feel like something else entirely. Level 5, the first secrets, the cabinet in the corner of the office requires your magical signature to open. The outgoing headmaster mentioned it once, briefly, in the transition. You assumed it was administrative, records, budgets, the kind of documentation that accumulates inside any institution over centuries. You open it in your 3rd week. You sit in front of it for 2 hours without moving. What is inside is not administrative. It is all record meticulous, ongoing, updated by every headmaster who preceded you of decisions that were never made public. Situations that were resolved in ways that protected the school's continuity at costs that were paid by individuals who never knew the full accounting. Students whose records were quietly altered. Incidents that were reported to the ministry in language so carefully chosen that the truth remained technically present but effectively invisible. Agreements made with families, powerful families, that shaped outcomes in ways that had nothing to do with the school's stated values. None of it is monstrous. This is the important thing. None of it, taken individually, is monstrous. Each decision in its own file, in its own context, has a logic, a justification, a reason why, at that particular moment, the person sitting in this chair determined that this was the least harmful available option. The accumulation is what is monstrous. You close the cabinet. You go to the window. The grounds are still there, the lake, the forest. The familiar geometry of the place you have loved for most of your adult life, it looks the same. You are aware in a way that is new and permanent that this is exactly the problem. It always looks the same. From the outside, from below, from the perspective of anyone who doesn't sit in this chair, it always looks the same. You understand now why they aged the way they did. Level 6, the weight no one sees, you make your first decision that goes in the cabinet on a Tuesday in November. You don't plan it that way. A situation arises, a student, a family, a set of circumstances that have no clean resolution, and you navigate it. You do what seems right, what seems protective, what seems like the least harmful path through a genuinely difficult moment. When it's over, you write it down precisely and completely, and you place it in the file. You notice your handwriting looks exactly like theirs. The previous ones? The same careful syntax, the same instinct toward precision. The same implicit understanding that the record exists to be honest even when the action it records could not afford to be. The staff see a headmaster who is calm, decisive, present. The students see someone whose door is open, whose judgment is trusted, whose presence in the castle is a form of stability they don't have to think about because it is simply there. The Board of Governors sees someone who manages the institution with competence and discretion. No one sees the cabinet. No one sees the particular quality of thought that now runs permanently beneath every conversation, the part of you that is always assessing, always managing, always holding the gap between what is known and what can be said. You still walk the castle at night. The habit never left, but the walks have changed. You are not observing anymore. You are monitoring. There is a difference, and it arrived without announcement, and some nights, in the long corridors with only the portraits for company, you try to remember what the observing felt like. The portraits watch you. They say nothing. They have been here through all of it, every. Headmaster's version of this exact night, and their silence is the most eloquent thing in the building. Level 7, the portrait, you know before the healers confirm it. The castle tells you the way the castle has always communicated the things that matter, not in words, but in texture. A change in how the stones feel when you walk the corridors at night. A quality of attention from the portraits that is different from their usual watchfulness. The school knows, the way old things know, and it is waiting. You have timed, not enough time there is, but some. You write letters. You make arrangements. You spend one full afternoon in the office simply sitting, not working, letting the room be a room and not a position. The instruments on the shelves tick and turn. The light comes through the high windows at its usual angle. The new headmaster will sit here and the cabinet will be there and the portraits will watch and the castle will shift or won't shift, and none of it, none of what you carried, will be visible from the chair. IT never is. That is, you understand now, entirely by design. What you know, the full inventory of what this office taught you cannot be transferred, not completely. You tried. The letters do their best. The conversations you had with your successor covered what could be covered. But the weight of it, the particular texture of holding all of it simultaneously while the school goes on looking exactly as it always has, that cannot be handed over. It can only be lived into. The portrait painter comes on a Thursday. You sit for 3 sessions. The result, you see it before it's hung, captures something true about the surface, the robes. The expression that learned, somewhere across the years, to be unreadable without being unkind. The eyes that look like they are watching something slightly past whoever is looking at them. What it cannot capture is the inside of it, the cabinet, the Tuesday in November. So walks? The gap between what you knew and what you could say held every day for years until the holding became the shape of you. The portrait will hang on the wall. It will watch the next one from its frame with the patience of someone who already knows how this ends. And when the next headmaster, young, capable, certain they understand how the school works because they can see it, asks the portrait for advice, you will answer carefully. You will say what is helpful. You will say what is true. But you will not say everything. Because some things, you now understand, are not passed down. They are simply carried, alone, until they aren't carried anymore. And then they wait in the cabinet for the next person willing to open it.